Welcome to the Fête College Football Podcast. I'm Gray Thompson, joined by Jay Spivey.
Howdy.
You smell delicious.
You know, I do smell good today.
I was joking.
Okay.
You don't smell good at all.
Well, let me tell you about Gray. Gray is an Alabama fan and a Clemson fan, but he's only a Clemson fan if he's not talking about Alabama.
Roll Tide.
Roll Tide.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Sounds good. Feels good to say, doesn't it, every time?
It does kind of feel good.
The audience can't see you, but you smiled when you said Roll Tide.
Well, as a Clemson fan, I'm just always kind of amazed that Alabama does not bother me. Whereas a bunch of the other schools in the South actually really bother Alabama, and it's because Bear Bryant was such good buddies with Frank Howard.
Is that right?
I mean, they were old school old guys.
This is why we have you on here, Jay, because you were around for the dawn of college football in 1813.
1813.
Yeah.
You know, when they first stitched together pieces of pigskin and started throwing it around, I was there.
All those championship runs at Harvard.
Yeah,
good
and
memories.
Yale.
And Yale, that's right.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Very successful. You're also a graduate of the University of South Carolina.
And that is going to be the only time we ever say that.
Is that right?
In this podcast, because I went to Clemson.
A proud Gamecock?
No. I'm a Clemson fan. I went to Clemson and South Carolina. But, unfortunately for me, but in a good way, South Carolina's a great school, but I'm a Clemson fan. Is South Carolina still playing football?
I'm afraid so, yes.
They still have a program.
They have a good program.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it's going to be competitive this year.
Well, let's go. IonGreenville.net is doing a weekly giveaway pick'em contest. Ion Greenville. It's ION Greenville.net. And so go in and register on their website, and they're doing weekly giveaways, and then they're going to crown a grand champion at the end of the football season. So here's your chance to, win some stuff.
Is it going to be me? Because I was fantastic on the Fête Football Minute last year with my predictions.
Both of us sign up, and we'll see.
Are we ineligible?
We'll see how we do compared to each other at the end of the season.
If you win the grand prize, you know what? We'll have to figure out some sort of betting mechanism for that.
There's got to be a side bet.
Mm-hmm.
I will have to think about that. That could be kind of fun. Well, let's talk about the top 20, which brings us to Alabama.
Yes, please, because they are number one.
They are number one. And who are they playing?
They're starting the season versus Louisville in Orlando, home of the Asterisk National Championship, University of Central Florida Knights.
Oh, yeah, well, they're the
12-0.
They're the Alabama wannabes.
Well, they 12-0.
Yeah, but that doesn't matter.
Doesn't?
No. They had a great parade. I'm glad.
They did have a really good parade.
I'm so happy they got to have their parade. But
do you think they're going to show up like en masse at the Alabama versus Louisville game?
I don't know.
I imagine a few fringe fans will be there, but it'll probably be more Alabama fans giving them a bird.
Do you think Alabama has anything to fear in Louisville?
Absolutely. Yes. I'll tell you this. So Alabama's ranked number one in the coaches poll. But I only think that's going to last 1 week because the spread is like 25 points against Louisville. Alabama is, let's just say, inexperienced in defense. They're returning 3 starters on defense, right? They had a ton of injury and attrition in the NFL. They do every year. Right. Alabama reloads, we know that. But they also sort of struggle sometimes in these opening games against competitive conference opponents. Louisville is coached by Bobby Petrino, an offensive guy.
Yeah.
However you want to use that term, offensive. I think they're coming out with their wide receivers. They're going to try to take advantage of the inexperience Alabama has in the secondary, for sure. And I think 25 is just too much.
It might be too much. And the Louisville receivers came out about a week or so ago saying that Alabama needs to fear them. So they've done a little trash talking.
For sure.
Which Louisville is known for.
It doesn't usually help when you trash talk Alabama. Usually that plays into Alabama's benefit.
Yeah,
I do think 25 points is too much. And again, what do we think about Louisville? Because if Alabama doesn't win by 25 points, what does that mean?
Yeah, because I'd hate to think. I'm not a Louisville fan. I'm not a coach of Louisville fan. So
Either coach, by the way. They've also got Brian Van Gorder as their defensive coordinator. If you've ever seen a Steven Seagal movie, he's the bad guy in every single one of them. He's got that creepy mustache. It's a porn stash, for sure.
Funny.
He was not good at Notre Dame. They had Elko after that, who was terrific. Now he's at A&M. But
well, I'm telling you, with top 25, with the first few games, or at least the first game of the season, there are only a few that are worth talking about. And number 6, Washington against Auburn.
I have to interrupt you there, by the way. I'm the guy who loves all of this stuff. They keep saying college football starts next weekend. It starts this weekend. It starts in 5 days with Hawaii at Colorado State and Prairie View versus Rice. I'm the guy who will watch those games. I'm a geek for this sport.
Yeah, but we're not going to talk about...
We're not
going to talk about... let's see on here, the worst one, Oklahoma versus Florida Atlantic.
Well, how do you feel about Austin P with a Y at the end?
Or, Stephen F. Austin playing Mississippi State. But, number 6, Washington and Auburn. Auburn's going to be a pretty good team this year. I mean, They're ranked 10th. So, I mean, this is a big game between the two of them.
Auburn's always a coin toss to me about whether or not they're going to be super competitive or just capable of ruining anybody's season.
Right.
Right?
Right. Is this the Auburn that lost to Clemson and then beat Alabama, or is this the Auburn that lost, 3 of the last 4 games of the season?
You could never tell. I mean, last year, Alabama played Mercer, and that's terrible. Oh, FBS, that's not good.
Plus,
but Mercer played at Auburn and gave Auburn hell.
Well, Washington always suffers. And what is it about some of the Western teams, about when they play good, hard-nosed Southern football teams, that they seem to struggle a little bit?
Defense, I would say. Chris Peterson's an offense. He's one of my favorite coaches in the sport. He's arguably the best coach in the Pac-12. That's where I'm at.
Yeah.
But defense has been sort of a question mark. They had Vita Vea, who was fantastic, but he's gone now. Of course, Auburn's lost a lot of people, too. They lost their best running back. He was fantastic. But both of them, again, this game to me is sort of also like Auburn, a coin toss. I don't know how to call this. 2 fantastic quarterbacks who may have really good Heisman campaigns of their own. But it's at Atlanta, where Auburn lost their last 2 games they played there, including against the UCF Knights.
And this is going to be interesting when we get into next week and we start talking on the weekly podcast about point spread and who's favored and all that stuff, because there'll be a lot more information about some of these games out next week. It may change a little bit in a week. I don't have a feeling for either one of those teams, Washington or Auburn.
It's tough. It's going to be fun to watch. I'll say that.
I'll tell you the
offense,
game,
if you like offense, which most fans do, for sure. It won't be boring.
We're going to find out a lot when number 8 Miami plays LSU.
Thank you. I feel like we've already talked too much about Auburn. Let's move on.
Miami, everybody's singing their praises, and I just don't know if Miami's going to be number 8 in the country good. And the best test they could have is an LSU that's struggling for respect but has a lot of great athletes. Because you never know with LSU. They could come in and beat anybody at any time if they just have a great game. We're going to find out a lot about Miami when they play LSU.
We will. I haven't heard much about Miami in the weeks leading up to the season, but LSU had 2 quarterbacks on the roster transfer out, which may or may not be a controversy. They've still got 2 very good quarterbacks. They lost another star. Was another wide receiver for Battery. Again, these off-season things are just crap. I'm ready for some real football and not all the garbage that happens in the off-season.
Well, and I'll tell you, number 11, Notre Dame versus Michigan.
I like Notre Dame. I'm a fan. Go Irish. They're 1 quarterback away from being spectacular every season, and yet they can't find a quarterback. Wimbush might be that guy, although he spent the entire summer just working on quarterback stuff. He's a graduate, but it doesn't sound like he's hit the mark. It doesn't sound like he's improved as a passer.
We're going to find out a lot because Michigan always has a great defense, and they're supposed to have a good one this year. So, if Notre Dame doesn't score and Michigan doesn't score either, this could be one of those old-school throwdowns. All you need is a little rain and mud, and it'll look like a game they played 50 years ago. To be honest,
I love it.
I can't stand Notre Dame because I think they're overhyped all the time. 3 out of every 4 years, let's put Notre Dame in the top 10 or 11 or 12 because they're Notre Dame. And for some reason, they always seem to fall short of taking that final step, at least in the last 10 years. And Michigan, Harbaugh is just one of those guys I don't like. So I kind of personally hope it's like a 0-0 tie, and they're playing multiple, extra time just to be able to figure out, and then just quit. I can't stand either one of them.
Gross.
Yeah.
I think Michigan has too many dudes on defense, and Notre Dame does not have enough of a quarterback on offense. I think Michigan wins this one. I hate it. I don't want it to happen. Hopefully it's close, but we'll see.
Now, number 17, Virginia Tech versus Florida State.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of Virginia Tech as a program, and obviously Bud Foster and everything that's gone on there is something that college football fans understand if you understand defense, but they've lost a lot of dudes. They're more of a negative question mark than a positive coin toss to me. And Florida State, I think, is going to be a big surprise in the ACC. We kind of expect Florida State to be right on the edge of brilliance every season, but they're not. I think this year could be one of those seasons. I really don't think this one's going to be competitive for what it's worth.
Florida State always has talent.
Mm-hmm.
And with
like Tennessee, right?
with 2 starting quarterbacks that can both play the game pretty well, they're talking about how Virginia Tech's quarterback is the second coming. So, unless they can throw up tons of points, and I just don't see Florida State having a bad defense.
Yeah, I don't either. And Florida State has Cam Akers. And you know what they say? Cam Akers is the place to be.
Farm. Well, one of the
They've
other
got
games,
dudes. They've got Willie Taggart, and he has been really good, I think, wherever he's gone. So we'll see.
Well, in honor of the toothbrush being invented in West Virginia, and they call it the toothbrush because it was invented in West Virginia. Otherwise, it'd be the teeth brush.
That's right.
Number 20, West Virginia playing Tennessee.
Yeah.
Now, how bad is Tennessee going to be this year?
Well, Tennessee will be the most improved team this year. You can mark my words right now. Mark the tape. The most improved team in the country because they were putrid last year. They were absolutely pathetic. I think we should just keep talking more about how bad Tennessee was because it doesn't get any worse. Winless in the SEC. Vanderbilt, way to go. Anchored down. Just couldn't do anything. Georgia Tech, great. That should have been a win for the Yellow Jackets, too. Even that game. Just what a mess. But Tennessee has had dudes. They've been able to recruit. And it's kind of been a shame to see what's happened to those recruits at Tennessee.
West Virginia is supposed to be smoking on offense this year.
They've got Will Grier at quarterback.
I'm telling you, this could be an ugly early game.
Will Grier has been around an awful long time. I think he's your age, Jay.
I don't think he's my age, but
he's getting there.
He's getting old for a college player. Now, are they playing this at that borderline, the racetrack, whatever?
At Bristol?
At Bristol.
I don't think it's at Bristol. I really don't care, Jay. It's
That's
Tennessee.
I know.
I feel like I'm getting a nosebleed. We've already talked too much about them.
Well, let's get on. All right, we're going to focus
I'm picking West Virginia just for the record.
Just because of Greer, I would think. Let's get on to the teams we're going to cover every week because we're certainly going to cover Georgia, Furman, South Carolina, Clemson, and Alabama every week because those are the schools who either really care about, they're local, or we really don't care about.
I don't want to gloss over Oklahoma versus Florida Atlantic with the Fighting Lane Kiffins. I think that one will be exciting, but I think Oklahoma returns too much, so now we can talk about something else.
I hope so. Well, let's talk about Georgia.
Okay.
Tell me what you think about Georgia.
They have a very favorable schedule. I don't think anybody has an easy schedule. There's no such thing. There's too much competition in the sport nationwide. We're living in a golden age. That's the truth. However, Austin Peay is not living in that golden age with the rest of us. And Austin Peay at Georgia, coming off, let's just say, 2nd and 26, Austin Peay is going to get buried. Somebody's going to get murdered and have to be buried between the hedges. It's not going to be pretty.
Who's going to start at quarterback for Georgia?
Somebody with the initials JF. Is it Jake from State Farm? Is it Justin Fields? It's going to be Jake Fromm. Yeah.
You think?
Yes.
I don't know. I mean, I think it's going to be.
Are you kidding me?
They're going to be in the same boat 2 or 3 games into the season.
Okay.
because they've got two really good guys.
I'll say this. I thought one of the things that was really great about Georgia last season with Jake Fromm was how well they were able to use his abilities, how well their coaching staff was at calling plays. Their tempo wasn't super high tempo, but it was fantastically orchestrated. It was a real dance out there, and you never knew where they were going to come from, and they had weapons everywhere.
Well,
Again, they have weapons this year. It's just a little bit less experience.
yeah. And I never worry about Georgia from a running back standpoint because they always have a great running back.
Yeah.
Or it seems like, especially now with Kirby Smart and everything else, they've done such a great job at developing lots of talent there.
Recruiting there has been,
Right.
I've never seen anything like it.
So, they're kind of due to make a run at the end.
Mm-hmm.
Granted, they got to play the tough SEC schedule.
Yeah.
But I'm truly, as an old school Clemson fan, it bothers me to say anything good about Georgia. You know why Florida doesn't fall in the ocean?
I do, because Georgia sucks.
That's right.
They don't suck. They're very talented this
They're
year,
very
and Kirby
talented.
Smart that's where he belongs.
He's
at
a great
Georgia.
coach.
Yeah, he's a great coach. He's got great assistant coaches, great coordinators, everything top to bottom, great strength and conditioning. He's bringing in these new guys because they're building there, basically telling these kids, hey, you're going to be the first kids to play here at this new fill in the blank. They're building a lot there at Georgia. I think they're doing it the right way. I like the way they play football.
I do see them making the playoff again.
Mm-hmm.
I really do. I think they're going to, and it's going to be, again, between them and Alabama in the end as to who gets there.
Let's just talk about that for a second. If Alabama wins the West and they face Georgia in the SEC title game in Atlanta, teeth are going to be flying out of helmets. It's not going to be pretty, no matter what. It's going to be tough.
Because it's hard in college football, and we know this as Clemson and Alabama fans. Just because you beat me last year,
that's right.
So now it's a revenge game for me. Even though, but that's the way Clemson did it, losing to Alabama and then winning the national championship. That's the way Alabama did it. They lost the national championship. Oh, well, we're going to come out and avenge that. So that's college football.
Yeah, you use whatever motivation you can find as a coach, and that just makes it easy to find.
Yeah, Georgia's going to come into this, thinking, we're better. We deserve a national championship if we play well.
They're not necessarily wrong. Alabama was getting their butts kicked in the first half. Jalen Hurts just was not great against Georgia at all. And Alabama had lost so much attrition to injuries on defense in particular. I do think Georgia may have been the better team, but that's why we watch the sport, Jay.
I tell you.
Pitt wasn't the better team when they came and beat Clemson either. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. And I just don't, as far as Georgia and Alabama go in the SEC, I just don't see anybody rising to the top, unless Florida gets lucky. I don't see anybody rising to the top to challenge Georgia.
Especially with their schedule. It is favorable.
Right. And other than Auburn, unless somebody like an Ole Miss or Mississippi State just has an incredible lucky run, nobody's really going to threaten Alabama on their side.
But that's the trick with the playoff. Again, without the playoff, Alabama's not in the national title game last year. Probably, right?
Yeah.
But once again, we haven't had an undefeated team win the playoff yet. Will it be this year? I don't know. However, let's just keep in mind, every Power 5 conference now has a conference title game. The Big 12 didn't until last year, and mind you, it's a guaranteed rematch because they have 10 teams, but they do play everybody. Those conference title games are sort of a de facto game to get into the playoff. So if Alabama and Georgia meet in Atlanta for the SEC title game, one of those two teams is not going to the playoff, period. I don't care what anybody says.
Yeah.
You can say Alabama lucked in. That's fine. Alabama and Georgia and Auburn, we're not both getting into the playoff. It's just not happening.
Right. Well, you look at most of these teams that we follow, and everybody has pretty big cupcake games starting out, and South Carolina's no exception. Carolina is playing Carolina, and I don't mean North Carolina. They're playing Coastal Carolina.
That's right.
So it's Coastal against South Carolina.
A lot of in-state action that weekend.
In Coastal, what are they, the Chanticleers?
That's right. Mm-hmm.
So, is this just going to be a big scrimmage for the Gamecocks down in Columbia, I would assume.
It should be, but they need it because apparently they're going to be running a very high-tempo offense, something we haven't seen, something that shouldn't come natural to a guy like Will Muschamp, who is a defensive-minded guy.
So you mean kind of like what Clemson does? That's what and has had success with. That's what you're saying that Carolina's going to do.
The difference is Clemson does it when they need to, right? Or to catch people off guard, or in situations where, say, for example, the 2 minutes. They know exactly what to do. That drive that they had to win the national championship, there was over 2 minutes left on the clock. Plenty of time for Clemson to get the football down the field. That's exactly what they did. It's not a coincidence. It's providence. How will that translate for the Gamecocks? Look, I don't think anybody really knows.
Well, I tell you, the big thing about South Carolina this year is we'll all know in Game 2 when they play Georgia. Because we'll know a lot about Georgia.
That'll be terrific.
And it's a pretty good yard. South Carolina plays Georgia tough.
Mm-hmm.
If South Carolina hangs in there and looks up or has one of those stellar days and beats Georgia, then South Carolina's on a whole different level in conversation across the country.
We'll see.
If they don't, everybody's going to say, well, they were supposed to lose. So, but it's a great yardstick for the South Carolina program and growing under the coach and everything else.
It won't be boring.
But Coastal's just going to be a scrimmage for everybody to get a chance to get in there.
Sure.
I wonder if they'll shorten the game.
Like when we were at Clemson for Georgia Southern?
Yeah,
that's
that
what
was
it was
funny.
Yeah.
And it makes you wonder who asked at halftime, can we shorten the game?
I don't know.
So
it wasn't my idea. I'll never shorten a college football game.
I didn't even know you could do that. Now,
I will say this, though. Georgia has great defense, for sure.
Yeah.
The only teams, I think great defenses can't be beat by just playing straight-up fundamental run-the-ball kind of football.
Right.
You have to play with tempo. That gives you a nice edge, and you have to be able to throw the ball. They've got Jake Bentley. They've got Deebo Samuel. Those are two guys who can really compete against anybody.
Yeah.
They both got to stay healthy. And they've
got a good tight end, too, don't they, at South Carolina?
I don't mean to just single those two guys out, except they really are exclamation marks. And they're going to have to be utilized to win anything, but especially against a team like Georgia. That can catch any defense off guard. In fact, again, I don't think you necessarily beat teams like that without throwing the ball. You got to throw the ball. You can't just run the ball against teams like Clemson, Alabama, Georgia. You just can't. You've got to throw the ball.
You've got to vary it up. You've got to mix up tempo. You've got to do a lot of things to be able to beat.
That's true.
Same thing with beating Alabama or beating Auburn's defense or beating Florida's defense or whatever. You've really got to be able to mix it up and do multiple things well, because if you're one-dimensional, those great defenses will eat you alive.
If you're willing to go for broke, it'll work. Syracuse last year, Friday the 13th, they couldn't be stopped. And it still came down to the wire, right? Nobody's getting beat out against, well, whatever. We'll get into that when the time comes, but nobody predicted that.
Well, in the end, the last big game we got to talk about of our local stuff is Clemson and Furman.
Clemson and Furman.
And that's like a scrimmage for Clemson to a degree.
So you're officially saying on the podcast here that you're picking Clemson to win that game at Clemson against the Furman Paladins.
To beat Furman.
Mm-hmm.
Furman will play them tough for a quarter.
Mm-hmm.
And there are just too many fast people on Clemson's entire team. It's going to be kind of – but, Dabo has an interesting philosophy. There are a lot of times in the last few years that he could have run up the score on a bunch of people and did not do that on purpose.
Mm-hmm.
Played everybody, rested the first stringers, all that kind of stuff. I see a lot of that happening, but when let's say your backup quarterback is Trevor Lawrence.
Never heard of him.
And he's going to be the first guy to win the Heisman 3 years in a row. So, when you put him in as the backup, you got to let him throw it because it's a scrimmage. So it could be 62-10 without even trying to run up the score, because you've got so much talent on the Clemson team.
To 10?
Yep.
I mean, how many years ago was it that Clemson, 58-0 at Miami?
Yeah. It could be.
If Dabo wants to, he can turn up the juice.
Because even if you just ran the ball, well, they've got three phenomenal running backs. You put in the second or the third one, what's he going to do? Get tackled on purpose when he runs up the middle and finds a hole? No, I mean, it could get to that point, and I'm sure that's why a lot of these schools where Georgia's playing their weak team opening and Clemson is and South Carolina is, because it's a great way of being able to scrimmage. I wish all that would end, because I'm tired. Now, great, it's good money for Furman. I'm sure Furman's making a few $100,000 out of playing at Clemson.
I don't know what they're making, but let's just say it's $2 million. It's not. We know it's less than that, but I think it's time, and I don't know how we get here, but to just have Power 5 conference games played against each other, we have to have some sort of regulatory board to set certain games in the schedule to keep conferences intact, keep those rivalries intact. But it's going to have to come from on high, so to speak, to make it Power 5 only. Then just give money to all those other schools who need it and stop using it as an excuse to play. There's a surplus of money in college football for sure, especially at the top between conference revenue sharing, that we can keep these schools. Do you think we couldn't give all of those schools, say, $200,000 like they're going to get to play Clemson? No, we can figure it out.
I just wish there was a way. It just seems kind of sad sometimes. Like the school makes money. Citadel gets to come up to Clemson or South Carolina and make a big payday. My concern is guys getting hurt on both teams.
It happens, for sure.
And if I were Citadel traveling to Alabama, I would be a little concerned as a coach of, holy cow, their guys are 30 to 80 pounds heavier.
Yeah.
3 to 4 or 5 inches taller, 2 to 3 steps quicker. And it's not that they're better people. They're not. They're just better athletes.
Well, but you also have it the other way around. So, for example, I remember Southern Miss coming to Tuscaloosa. Amari Cooper gets hit in the knee. Oh, he's down. Nobody's watching the game, right, so to speak. I'm watching it and go, this is the kind of thing that happens because they're not trained the same either. We all like to see those teams compete or even win against Power 5 opponents. But it also, I don't think it's sad. I think it just adds way more confusion. It doesn't really help you say, oh, this team's better than that team when they beat Mercer or didn't beat so-and-so. It doesn't help.
BYOG, bring your own guts.
That's right.
Spill it out onto the floor.
I love all that kind of stuff.
Go get them Chanticleers.
Go get it. I just don't, I don't know how you end up rectifying that thing. And I love seeing that Clemson's booked Georgia or trying to book Georgia and booked LSU out in the future. And it, hopefully there is a way that these schools will all strive, because if you want to stay on the top of college football, ultimately you're going to have to play the best teams.
Yeah.
Otherwise, you're Boise State, or let's say
we forgot about them, didn't we?
You've got schools out there that never have the opportunity to a degree to play these big and bad power programs. Man, if I were Clemson or Boise State, I would say I'd like to schedule that game, because, boy, you talk about getting West Coast audience watching a Clemson football game. I would love to see Clemson play UCLA or something like that, because, it would only benefit both schools to do that kind of stuff and take this Austin
P.
with a Y, Coastal Carolina. But all these little schools are going to get upset because they're going to lose money.
Let's be real clear. Everybody plays a school like that or two every season.
Oh, I know.
It's not unique.
I know.
But
if you changed one game on all the Power 5 school schedules, you would almost wipe out that conversation.
What if we just forced one game? So say, for example, we take the official rankings from the end of any season, now that we actually have those, use that to determine one game for the next season. Yeah, it's going to cause logistical problems for sure, but man, how exciting would that be to know that we're betting on a better matchup?
Yeah, because when you look at it, Clemson and South Carolina, outside of South Carolina's got Chattanooga. They've got Marshall. Now, Marshall used to be scary as crap.
They also play Tennessee. Let's not leave that easy team out.
But they got to play that conference.
Yeah.
And Clemson basically has two games, the Furman and the Georgia Southern game. But it wasn't so long ago that Georgia Southern was the perennial champion of their division, and then they decided to move up.
Is that right?
Yeah. So
See, this is why I like having you on here. You
So-
remember this ancient history stuff.
very ancient history. But even with Georgia, I mean, UMass isn't a weak little tiny school. They may not be known for their strong football program, but they're not Austin P.
No. But it wasn't that long ago that we just didn't have this level of nationwide competition. TCU, we didn't know about TCU. Oregon was non-existent, right?
Well, I mean,
North Carolina competed for the ACC just a few years ago, but you have nationwide competition where none of it's easy anymore.
when you consider that Tennessee's so bad,
They're so bad.
that means Alabama has probably more cupcake games because they'll play Tennessee, the Citadel, Arkansas State, and literally they probably should beat the crap out of Louisville. That means
No, I disagree with that.
No, if they're going to be 25-point favorites,
Yeah.
that's 4 cupcake games on Alabama's schedule.
I think Tennessee should count as 2
To
cupcakes.
well,
Yeah, so and a half win.
they could be just like the whole cake.
An asterisk.
No, but I mean,
Tennessee they'll get
So,
better.
literally,
and Jeremy
Alabama-
Pruitt was a great hire. Tennessee to date is still nobody has beaten Alabama more than Tennessee. That's Alabama's rival, make no mistake.
but Alabama's like the prime example of playing too many cupcake schools.
Okay.
Now, granted, they have to
finished?
turn around.
Because like Clemson, they're going to be favored in every single game, period.
It really doesn't matter what you think. All right? It really doesn't matter what you say.
I've been waiting to play that sound effect this whole
Jay
podcast.
Spivey, you are rat poison.
I am rat poison.
And I
You
drink
think-
from your cup,
You
sir.
think we just shit out other players, Gray? Is that what you think?
I kind of do, actually.
That's so funny. Yeah, I feel for old Nick Saban. We were talking earlier. If he just had just a touch of just a kind, wise ass about him, people would adore him all
No,
over
they
the
wouldn't.
world.
Because he's doing that now, but no, that's not news. Nobody
he-
wants to watch him smile and joke.
Nobody hates the press more than he does.
Oh, well,
He just doesn't want to talk.
we're easy to hate, Jay. We are officially rat poison.
And I can't wait. I mean, my favorite thing really this season, there are a couple of games that I'm really, they're trap games for every team.
Trap games.
So my trap game for Clemson is Boston College towards the end of the season.
See, I don't think Boston College is a trap game so much as we should expect Boston College to be very competitive this
They're
year.
tough. I mean,
They have a really tough November, so they're going to end up with a few more losses than would represent what they actually are. But they arguably have the best offensive line in the country versus Clemson's best defensive line.
with a
It's going to
Heisman
be
Trophy
brutal,
candidate.
for sure. Well,
And when I think of Boston College, and it's been this way as far back as I can remember, they block well and they tackle well.
they're not fun to play.
And it's like a fundamental team that is going to punch you in the mouth.
They do.
in the trenches, and it, Georgia Tech always makes me nervous because of that crazy, stupid offense. But Boston
it's bad on your
College-
knees.
Boston College seems like the one game this year. What's the game for Alabama that's going to trip them that they shouldn't trip over?
I think Missouri's going to be tough because they have a really good quarterback, but it's got to be Mississippi State. They had a really big hire, I would say an underrated hire, in Coach Moorhead coming in from Penn State, who said something about wanting to guarantee a Heisman there this year. They're going to have a good good campaign. Nick Fitzgerald, though, he's just a huge guy.
Yeah.
He looks a lot like Trevor Lawrence. He's just not nearly as good looking. He's a big dude who can sling the ball, and he had a bad injury. My biggest concern for them is whether or not he's recovered well enough to be competitive. It was a really gross injury he had.
I just think Mississippi State might be one. The team I'm watching,
It's
the SEC.
at Tuscaloosa, though, and that,
I think Ole Miss is going to shock some people this year.
why?
I just think they are.
I think they're going to be competitive. They're not easy, and they've got a gunslinger.
They got a gunslinger. They
And
got some
Alabama
receivers.
gets them in, week 3. It's on the road. It's their first SEC game. I don't like Ole Miss. I say I don't like Ole Miss. I love Ole Miss. I love Oxford. That's a great place to go watch a football game. But just like those parking spots, and it's competitive. They're competitive. They want to beat you.
So what game are you looking forward to the most for Alabama this year?
Ooh, good question. I want revenge on Auburn. I think it's fair to say that.
That's
yeah,
pretty
that's
normal.
going to be in Tuscaloosa. It's in November. It's the end of the season. It's always spectacular.
That's like, I mean, there are people, families, towns, communities all over Alabama that just fight constantly. It's a rivalry that, as a Clemson and South Carolina student and a fan of Clemson, our rivalry is heated and it's long lasting and all that. But it is a different world with Alabama Auburn.
I disagree. Alabama, Tennessee, like it or not, that's still our biggest rival for sure. We hate Tennessee. I'm glad that we have a podcast where I can scream it to the masses. It's fine, but that's the only team I'll say that against.
Right.
Auburn, I don't like parts of their culture, but I like Auburn. I like the way they play football.
Right.
They do have dudes this year.
But
They're
you
not going
have
to
a
be putrid and winless in the SEC, for
You
example.
have a hatred for Tennessee.
But Auburn, you at least have to give them this. When Auburn and Alabama play, it's often for all the marbles. It's
Right.
meant something.
Right,
Usually
it's a big
playing
deal.
Tennessee hasn't often meant that. It's meant ruining someone else's year, which isn't fun. Auburn, we thought it might have ruined Alabama's season last year, but then we see the results and Roll Tide national champions. It's all good.
Well, the Clemson game I'm looking forward to this year is NC State.
I want to say first, though, gross. The Clemson-South Carolina rivalry is, in my personal opinion, the most underrated, most hateful rivalry in the country that nobody else knows about.
Yeah.
I came here and just thought, oh, it's an in-state thing. Again, growing up, my mother went to every Clemson home game when I was in her belly.
Yeah.
It's in my blood, right?
Yeah.
I am a fan. We can talk about all that crap later.
Bama crap.
I
yeah.
root for Clemson, make no mistake. However, that game against the Gamecocks is very intense. It's an intense rivalry for sure, in the way that I don't think compares quite the same to Alabama-Auburn. I think they just have bigger fan bases,
Yeah,
and it's been
probably
more
so.
relevant for
Right.
longer, right?
It's been written about more.
Yeah.
It's more nationally televised
Sure.
than Clemson, South Carolina. And for the main reason, I mean, Clemson didn't go through the early television era as being big on television as drawing an audience. So even when they won the national championship in '81, they were seen as such an underdog against Nebraska. And so they've never been like Oklahoma, Notre Dame, Ohio State, Michigan, all this from a TV audience.
Sure.
Whereas Alabama always was, Auburn to a degree was at a certain point, but Clemson and South Carolina have never been in that boat. It is interesting to me as a Clemson fan and seeing all the back and forth, that, man, when Spurrier, the biggest jerk to ever coach football.
I love the old ball
when-
coach, man. I
when-
miss him.
I can't stand him. He hasn't, like, he's like the most arrogant, rude guy ever. But anyway, when he was winning at South Carolina, and they were doing a good job beating up on Clemson, the South Carolina fans have a chip on their shoulder when it comes to Clemson.
Okay.
Oh, my God, fear the thumb, all this other stuff about we're going to
It
be
was effective.
Well, yeah, but guess what's about to happen this year?
They have to fear the thumb from the Kentucky Wildcats.
They have to fear the thumb from Clemson.
Is that right?
So
Are we in that?
we're
Time zone?
the whole idea to me that South Carolina had a few good years under Spurrier, which is great.
Yeah.
But the program couldn't sustain itself.
Yeah, but again, that rivalry matters so much.
Right.
That fear in the thumb, yeah, you have to. You got to fear the middle finger too.
Yeah.
It's
But as a
nasty.
Clemson fan, I want South Carolina to be good.
You do?
Because
Do you really?
I want that game to be decent.
Okay.
The teams I
It'll
don't
be decent.
the teams I don't want to ever win a game again are like Georgia, Tennessee, and
You're in luck.
and whichever team
Mm-hmm.
that thug coach Urban Meyer is at, I
Oh.
want them to never win a game. So when he was at Florida, I wanted Florida to go
Yeah.
winless all season. And now the Ohio State and all the mess he's going through and all that there, I couldn't care less if Urban Meyer never won another college football game.
Do you remember the score the last time Clemson played Ohio State?
Oh, it was like 38-0 or something.
31-0. You really don't remember that?
I do remember that.
Do you know my favorite number?
31-0.
No, my favorite number.
31.
It's 0. I love a defense that can
Right.
hold an offense
Right.
to 0
Right.
points. It's hard to do. It's not just hard, but like you were saying about Sweeney, you take your foot off the gas. You don't want to embarrass people like that.
No.
58-0 is an anomaly, but it's not to say that you
But
aren't
sometimes there are
capable
breaks.
of it.
Yeah, there are breaks in some games, and the one game that Clemson plays this year
Mm-hmm.
that I want to see it be 31 or 83 to nothing
You want a bowling score.
is NC State.
Great.
Because, Ohio State has their thug coach.
Mhm.
Well, the last couple of years, something about the NC State coach just gets under Dabo's.
Doran?
Yeah.
Yeah, well, he's
So the
kind of picked
whole-
at him too. It's been
So-
back and forth.
And to quote Dabo Sweetie, buildings
Mhm.
don't win championships.
It's a good quote.
That came out of the ACC press week, and there's something about the coach at NC State that ticks off Sweeney at Clemson, and I agree with Sweeney at Clemson. And now that last year was supposed to be NC State the Wolfpack year, they had all this talent on defense and offense and everything. Well, now they've lost a lot of that talent. Yeah, they got a great quarterback. I hope Clemson beats them 38-0.
I've learned to respect teams, to respect coaches, to try to understand them better. You know what I'm saying. Dave Doran is one of those guys who he's forced me to take away some of that respect versus Coach Sweeney, who has earned more than we ever thought possible.
Right.
He really deserves what he gets. But to make a guy like Coach Sweeney get that upset about direct quotes from another coach, it's got to be tough to do, right?
Yeah.
It's not easy, and it's rare.
Well, I just hope it's beginning of second half, NC State's getting crushed, and they continue to get crushed. This is the perfect game for that. If I could pick a game and say I want you to just blow the other team away, this year it would be NC State.
Once again, I think you're in luck. Is
I
that
hope
game
so.
played at Clemson?
I can tell you real quick. Yes, it's at Clemson.
Yeah, that's what I thought.
And it's after a week layoff. So it's October 20th. So Clemson's going to be able to rest up a week.
Yeah, that can be good or bad.
They're
But
gonna-
for
they're
Clemson,
gonna
it
beat
always seems to be good.
They're going to beat the tar at NC State. I hope.
I think the Wolfpack will be an endangered species.
Well, let's wrap this up for this week. We're going to be doing this every week. So every Tuesday, we're coming out.
Yeah.
So we'll have all kinds of insight, especially once the scores start coming in. We start figuring out who sucks and who doesn't suck, because that's really what it comes down to in college football.
I don't suck.
You don't suck.
I watch a lot of games.
I don't suck. You're the expert. I'm just the color commentary that accompanies you to stuff like this.
Can I call Labor Day Happy New Year? I
Yeah.
mean, that is when everything changes, right? All the schools are back in session. Traffic patterns change. The weather starts to change. I watch TV. I don't watch a lot of TV, but when football starts, I'll be watching it all. I'll be cackling at Allstate commercials for the first weekend.
Yeah.
Geico, State Farm, all the insurance companies. They have really funny commercials once you've seen them twice.
Right.
And I haven't seen them yet.
Well, I'll get tired of the Heisman ads when we start getting to the end of the season, because those can either be great or horrible. But we're going to be doing this every week. Every Tuesday afternoon, we're going to come out with a new Fête College Football podcast. Remember now, sign up for the Pick'em contest with iongreenville.net. That's IONgreenville.net. And I guess, what do you want to leave us with?
I want to say thank you, Jay Spivey, for everything you do for FET. Everything you've done for me through FET has been fantastic. I've always wanted to do a podcast, and here we are talking about one of my favorite things. It smells bad in here, but hey, it's small price to pay.
College football is, to me, like, I don't know, it's like part of the family. It's like the meat and three. It's like everything else that I love, having grown up in the South and especially around Greenville. College football is the goods.
Every game, to me, matters, period.
I love seeing
It's
young
hard to beat.
guys out there struggling, trying to make a name and a place for themselves. And college is so much better to me than pros, because here are people that are being transformed into better people, better human beings, and it's just downright damn fun.
It's on a personal level, it's hugely important to me to see young men being taught by older people how to think, act, feel, and behave on a much better level in a way that you're not supposed to get in the pros when you're already a millionaire. It's hard to convince those people to be prepared to learn. These young guys, they don't do it. They love to do it. They can't wait to do it. They do a great job of it. We're seeing it now more than ever before. It's a great time.
Plus, there are little schools that will beat a big school, and that only happens in college. And I just love the idea that there is always that chance of Appalachian State showing up at Michigan that you're like, holy cow, what the hell just happened?
Yeah.
Well, anyway, I really appreciate your help with this, Gray.
Always a pleasure.
And we will see you next week on the Fête Football Podcast.
Bet it be.